I wanted to show you a couple things that will probably help you with your transitions, and I'm gonna show you how I made the hand and how I made it move. I'm gonna just open up a new comp. And I'll say example. So let's start with making a circle. And because I don't have anything down here, it's just gonna automatically add a shape layer. That's great. I want to make sure that I change the anchor point to the center. And I'll first show you how I made it move in that circle path. So we know that I could take my anchor point and I could drag it out here, and then I could go to rotation and I could swing it around. That's one way to make something move in a circle. But I'm just gonna go back to the anchor point in the middle. I want to actually make it move with the position and not the rotation. I'll scale it down just a little bit. All right, that's fine. So position, I'll set a keyframe here and then move around, let's do around 3 seconds. And I want it to end up here, but I want it to like come around and swing up. And this may be obvious, it may not be obvious, kind of depends on how familiar you are with Bezier paths. But it works in a very similar way where we have these handles that we can drag out, and it will help us position the shape. I'm sorry, it will help us create the animation path of the shape. So we have it coming down and around, so that's great. And I know that my hand is going to end up smaller. So I'm going to hit my scale button and come over to the same point where it stops, and I'll adjust this so that it's even smaller. Now a nice way to bring up all your keyframes is to just hit U. That's going to bring up the keyframes, or sorry, the properties. It's going to bring up the properties that you have put keyframes on. So I can see that this isn't quite lined up and I want it to be, so I'm just gonna knock that forward. And let's just move them to 3 seconds so it's nice and even. So, all right, now we have it not only changing in position, but also in scale. So that's how we could have started this hand right here. We just have it change in position and scale. But then we have this trim path. This right here is just a trim path. We have it coming down and moving out. So what I want to do is, I'm going to start here and make a new shape layer. And I'm going to position my shape layer I'm going to position my trim path kind of how I want it. I'll change this. Let's make it a nice light green color. And bump up the stroke. Okay, so we got that. And I can take this underneath. Let's make our white circle a different color. Let's make it a darker green. And now I'm gonna, I'll relabel this circle and trim. I can call it trim path or pencil. I'm gonna call it pencil. But let's adjust it just a little more. so that it lines up a little better. Maybe the stroke comes up a little more. That looks pretty good. So I can go into my pencil, I can add the trim path. And now we can see, I can start it and make it grow. So I can, I'll keep it extended for right now. And now what I want to do is I want to parent my pencil part to my circle. So we know what's going to happen when we start to move backwards. It's also going to move with it. I'm going to have the pencil start to emerge, maybe like right around here at 2.5 seconds probably. So I'll open up my trim paths again. I will back the end down to 0. I'd like to set both, just in case I decide to use both, and I will drag that up. All right, and because the size of the scale of the circle is changing, because the scale of the circle is changing, the scale of the trim path also changes. Okay, so we can see here there's a little bit of rotation that occurs. So I can add that rotation. On my circle. I'm actually gonna, maybe we'll set that here. Kind of depends on how we want the trim path to come in. Rotation down. What's that look like? That's good. So for the trim path, if we want to have a nice round cap, we go into stroke and we change butt cap from round cap. Now we see that it actually extends a little bit too far. We could change that just by going into the start position if we wanted. I'm actually going to move this up here, and there we go. So this, because I pushed that up and I changed that, this would have to start at 2, I believe. Yeah. Okay. This is coming down a little bit too low. I don't like how low it's coming down. So I'll pull this up a little. Maybe round that back out. And for the fingers, I did the same thing. I added trim paths. So for the main finger, I'm going to add another new shape layer, pointer finger, and I'm going to change my stroke to match. This is probably a little too thick. Whenever you're moving between the ends of your trim path, if you have the pen tool on, so you have to be careful. If this little circle appears, that means you're going to close it. And that actually means that I have like 2 lines there. You can see it has a fill right now. I'm going to Command Z. Let's add a trim path. And I'm also going to make sure that I parent this to my circle right now. Because remember, it does matter when you parent it. So obviously, like if we were to parent it here, then that's not what we want, but it's going to move in a different way. So parenting it in this position that I want it to be. Let's make this a round cap. Excellent. And now it moves with it. So if we wanted a music note, that's actually a great music note. It can start to have the finger disappear. I'll maybe start it around 1 second, and it disappears, we'll say right before the pencil starts to come out. And then I did that for the second finger and the second finger and the third finger. Those are also trim paths. I parented them, and these lines, I parented those as well. Those are also trim paths, separate trim paths. And you don't have to be using trim paths. I mean, you could be using anything. Like, let's say we wanted to have a triangle come out of one side of this circle. So I'm going to draw my triangle freehand and take down the stroke. I'm going to change the fill to match. And one great thing about when I am working with a shape that I have drawn freehand is, remember, I can actually also animate these points that are in here. And I do that by going to the path. Let's make this a different color so we can see it better. There we go. So I could animate these points by hand if I wanted to, or I could, I'll show you both. I'm going to move my, I'm going to move the anchor point to the triangle down to the bottom. And unfortunately, when we scale it on X and Y, that really won't work. In order to have done that, what we would need to do is just make a triangle pointing up this way. And now, if we were to go into the scale of this one, unlock it, now it works. I have drawn this triangle right here on an angle, but X and Y were still in their like respective positions, and so I needed to actually draw my triangle in position of the X and Y. So let's take that. Let's actually get rid of this one. Now if I rotate and then go to scale, it should still work. Yes, okay. And I could make some adjustments. I could come into the contents, path, and now I'll go ahead and I'll parent this to my circle, and I actually want it to start not in the frame. So I'll start my scale here, and as it starts to rotate, let's have it start to appear around here, and Here we go, we got our triangle poking out. I hope that's helpful. I hope that made some sense. But I think really the main thing I'd like you all to remember is that you can make a shape and then you can adjust its position pretty easily. And when you adjust the position, you can change its path. And I didn't adjust my anchor point here, so that's why my shape is way over here, but my anchor point's there, and my path is down here, but my shape's not on it. I should have adjusted my anchor point. And of course, if you add more keyframes, you can do even more. All right, one more quick thing. This is an alternative way to making groups move besides parenting. Parenting can get pretty, like you can get a lot of layers fast. So if you're someone who doesn't want to work with a ton of these layers and you want to try and stay a bit more organized in a certain way, then you can use precompositing like we went over the other day. And so I'll show you real fast that idea. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to move my anchor point back to the position. Let's just turn off all these. So I've got my oval, and I want the triangle to come out of the, sides, so new shape layer. I'm going to draw my triangle like this. And I can also make some adjustments. Okay, so now instead of parenting, I gotta change the anchor point again because I pushed my triangle up, so let's do that. Now, instead of parenting, I'm just going to go ahead and animate the scale first, and we'll worry about the oval moving in a second, but I wanna animate the triangle first. So I'll go back to this position and take that out. And I'll duplicate this and oops, I put on the ruler. Duplicate and rotate, and let's take this down beneath. So now we've got our, I don't know, maybe it's kind of a lime or something. It becomes very pointy. It looks like a lime right here. So, but we've got this coming out, and I'm gonna take my triangle, and then my other triangle, and then my oval. These three. I should have named them, but we'll just make them a different color. So these three are what we got here, and I'm going to precompose. So remember, precomposing, right click, precompose, and I'll say lime. So I've got my lime right here, and now I can make adjustments on this layer, and I could change the position and the rotation. Let's make sure the anchor point is exactly where I want it. That's where I want it. Rotation. So what I did was kind of similar in the fact that like I now have my triangles moving with my oval, and all I have to do is control one layer, but it's all inside of here. So it presents a way in which you want to work. Like some people prefer to have all these layers, and then some people prefer to click through compositions. This can get it can create its own sort of mess because you got to know exactly where your compositions are if you do this. So example, and you click through and you go to Lime, and then imagine if you had another composition inside of here, and so it can go pretty deep, and you can make a lot of compositions that way, which gets a little messy. If you have questions about this, please let me know. This might not have been the most clear, but I hope it was somewhat clear.